All right, hi everyone. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to show you how to plant tomato seeds and pepper seeds, or how to start them inside. Most of the things that we're going to plant in a garden in Alberta are going to be things that we can direct seed into the soil outside. Things like cucumbers, carrots, beets, lettuce, onions, all of that stuff can go directly into the garden. So really the only thing I worry about seeding ahead of time are my peppers and my tomatoes. So to start our seeding, we're going to be seeding into potting mix, and this potting mix it's kind of funny. It's made mostly of peat moss, and it repels water when it's dry, but it also does a really good job of holding water when it's wet. So there's a couple different things you can do. You can fill up your seeding trays with the potting mix, dry potting mix, and plant directly into that. But I find unless you have something to water like this, I've got a sort of a little watering spout on the end of my 2-liter bottle. Most of you aren't going to have that, and that provides for really gentle watering. Unless you have the ability to do that, I would recommend probably wetting your soil first, wetting your potting mix first. And so just let it sit. I have this stuff here that was just sitting in a little bit of water. And so you'll see when I take this potting mix, if I squeeze it as hard as I can, a little bit of water comes out, and that's about how wet you want it. You don't want it any more wet than that, but that's going to give you a nice potting mix to work with. So you can take your wet potting mix and fill up your seeding tray. Now we're not packing this down. We do want it to be a little bit loose in there so that the roots have room to grow and have air, and it's not too compact for the plant. So just nice and loose like that. You can kind of gently tap it down just to make sure that there's no big air pockets in there. But that's how you're going to set up your seeding tray. So when it comes to seeding, I find one of the most common mistakes that my students make is planting the seeds too deeply. And so sort of a good rule is that you want the seeds to be about 3 times as deep as they are wide. And you can see how tiny these tomato seeds are. So they don't need to be very deep at all. So all I'm going to do is in the middle of each one of my cells here, I'm just going to make a tiny little divot in the middle of each one. So it doesn't have to be very deep at all, probably half a centimeter or so. And then we're just going to put these seeds right into that little divot. I like to put 2 per hole, just in case one doesn't germinate. I've got a bit of a backup, so you don't have to. You can do 1, but I like to put 2 in each hole. And you can see they're not very deep. And then I'm just going to barely cover them up with a little bit of potting mix, and I'm just gently tamping it down so that there's good contact between the seed and the soil there. And that's it. That's all you have to do to seed them. Once you've got that done, you do the same thing if you're planting peppers. Peppers are a little bit bigger, so they can go a little bit deeper, but not much. It would be about the same, about 3 times deep as the seed is wide. And so take our pepper seeds and place a couple in there. And same thing, just gently tamp that down. All right, so after we've planted our seeds, we shouldn't need to water it. As long as our potting mix was wet enough when we put it in our container there, and we've tamped it down well enough, there should be enough moisture around the seed that it'll be enough for it to germinate. I have taken the little container though and put it inside this plastic bag. It's gonna act like a little greenhouse and keep some of the moisture in. It's also gonna keep things clean in our house so we don't get dirt everywhere. And so now that you've done that, where do we put this? Well, the key is to maximize the amount of light that's available. So find the sunniest spot in your house. It could be a south or a west facing window, and put it right in front of that window. We want it nice and bright and as sunny as it can. And to be honest, it's still a little tricky. Even if you have maximum amount of sunlight in a window, the plants are going to get a little bit leggy or a little bit spindly, and we'll talk about that in a later video. But the key is to have the most amount of light you can. If you have a grow light, or if you have an aquarium light or something like that, you can put it over top of your plants in the window so that they have both the sunlight and a light over top. If you do that, I would keep the light a few inches above the plants. So that's key, having the most light you possibly can. Like I said, if you don't have an artificial light, that's fine. Put it in a bright sunny window. All right, so we've already established that light is key. We want the most amount of light, but a couple other growing conditions to be aware of. Ideally, you'd have a place that's around 24, 25 degrees, a little bit warmer for the seeds to germinate, but if they're in a bag like this in a window, they're absolutely gonna be that temperature during the day, so you don't need to worry about that. And then as the seedlings start germinating, should take about a week or so for tomatoes and peppers, and as they start growing, you're gonna want hopefully an area that cools down a little bit. So I know at home I can put mine in our south-facing window that's in the basement. Our basement gets a little bit cooler at night. So you want a little bit of fluctuation in temperature for the tomatoes or for the peppers, where it's warmer during the day and cooler at night. Like I said, if you can't do that at home, if they stay in the same window, that's fine. That's just in ideal circumstances, just like a greenhouse, right, where it would be a little bit cooler at night and a little bit warmer during the day. And then the other thing is air circulation. So as soon as the tomatoes and peppers sprout, as soon as you see the little green coming out the top, then you can take them out of the bag. And we want to make sure they've got good air circulation after they've started sprouting. All right, so these tomatoes are about 3 weeks old, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about watering. So after you've taken them out of the plastic, their little mini greenhouse, every couple of days they're going to probably need water. Most of you probably aren't going to have this kind of watering can or spout on the end of a bottle, so it's nice and gentle. But what you want to try and do is avoid getting water on the foliage inside, just because there's not a lot of air circulation and that could lead to different diseases on the plant. So I like to try and avoid getting water on the leaves. Probably the best thing to do actually is just to take your tray, put it inside maybe an old baking dish or maybe a margarine container or something like that, and we're just going to add water to the bottom and let the water get sucked up into the potting mix through the bottom, because there's holes in the bottom of these trays. So we're just gonna let the water suck up, and that's probably the best way to water it. You'll see it get nice and wet on the top, and once it's nice and heavy and it's absorbed as much water as it can, then you can place it back in your window. And just keep an eye on it every couple days. We want to make sure that the plants aren't drowning in water, but that there's enough, but that they've got enough water that they're not drying out and that they're happy. Last thing I didn't mention earlier is labeling. Labeling is critically important. You want to label the types of tomatoes that you have. So I usually just take a Sharpie and just write on the side here when I'm seeding it. Again, it's a really common mistake that a lot of students will make, or a lot of gardeners will make, is they think, oh, I'm going to remember what these are, and then 3 weeks later you forget which ones are which. And so really important, label your containers so you know what you're growing. And if you're really happy with something, then you knew what you grew and you can grow it again the next year. So there you go. That's a quick little tutorial on how to seed tomatoes and peppers indoors. If you have any questions at all, just leave me a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you.